I'm Hannah Wallace and welcome to Sustainable Finance Live, the first in a series of events led by Finextra Research and Responsible Risk. Kindly joining me now is Matthew Smith of Agrimetrics.
Hello.
Hello, Matthew. Thank you very much for joining us.
It's a pleasure.
Now, I want to start the interview by you telling us a bit about yourself, but also what Agrimetrics do.
Yeah, sure. So I just recently joined Agrimetrics as Chief Product Officer. And Agrimetrics has been running for about 5 years to address a problem that the UK government identified. So it's a government-funded entity, an agri-tech centre, as they call them. And the problem is that with agricultural productivity and sustainability in agri-food supply chains is not improving as fast as it needs to. And actually in the UK is not improving as fast as we see elsewhere in the world. And one of the reasons being that we're not harnessing value from the data that we are getting on those agri-food supply chains. And so we were really set up to accelerate organizations throughout the agri-food sector getting that new value, new profits, more sustainability, connection to different markets, growing into new markets by harnessing data. And there's a lot of work that needs to be done in order to harness those data sets in order to generate value. So we're really an accelerator to give that a boost for the UK in particular.
It's fascinating and a really intricate subject. So from your experience then, as a scientist and someone who's delivering products in sustainable finance, do you believe we can resolve these challenges around assessing, understanding data necessary for sustainable finance, but also how?
Yeah, there's no doubt practically that we can solve these challenges in terms of having reliable data, in terms of giving people clarity as to what sustainability metrics are about, in terms of connecting with a consumer base who wants to invest in more sustainable options. We can solve all those problems. We have technologies we can use to help us solve those problems, although technologies won't solve all those problems. But we have to go through a process of evolution to get there.
Sure.
And the challenge we have right now is whether we can adapt fast enough in order to address a lot of the sustainability climate challenges and mitigate and avoid the damage that would happen if we don't address it as quickly as we can. So these improvements will inevitably happen. And the challenge we're all addressing is how do we get there as quickly as possible to achieve a sustainable future as quickly as possible, because the more time it takes to get there, the more damage we do on the way to getting there. So that's what we need to focus on, is getting how we get there quick.
All right, and one of the technologies helping in this space is, of course, artificial intelligence and machine learning. So what's the role in sustainable finance, but also for your organization here?
Well, artificial intelligence and machine learning it's really becoming the toolbox we use to help derive meaning from a lot of the data sets that are available. So to translate it from what is sensed into what that tells us about the things we care about, the KPIs. So it's the data processing machine. And the wonder of how technology has developed in the last couple of decades is we can sense most things. And we can sense most things in many different ways. We can observe things from satellites. We can put sensors in the field. We can ask for people to provide their inputs. We can allow them to still fill in the forms by hand, audit forms, for example, and use a machine to easily read them, or hopefully avoid that entirely and just learn from data that's collected elsewhere what they would have answered for that audit. But in order to really derive meaning from those information streams, we then use artificial intelligence to learn the relationship between what those information sources, the information those different data sources provide, and the thing we really care about. So we would like an artificial intelligence given satellite imagery of shipping going on in Southeast Asia, like what we saw in the presentation this morning, to be able to process over the different information streams, such as that satellite imagery and other imagery and other information, and say the risk that there is illegality there, or there's overfishing there, or there's some problem there. And AI is, and ML is really a key booster to accelerate us towards churning out that actionable information to prevent us having to manage each sensor on a case-by-case basis.
And now coming back to the event, you'll be speaking today about building a green bond. So can you tell our audience what this means and what you think the key takeaways will be?
Yeah, so the challenge we're all having to address is that there's a lot of support for green finance initiatives. There's a lot of money put aside by banks, by organizations investing in those banks, to identify opportunities to invest that are sustainable, that meet investors' needs. And the challenge we have is a lot of that identified money is not really flowing through the system. There's a lot of build-up of willingness to invest, and it's not meeting market demand. And there are a number of blockers for why it's not meeting market demand, like a lack of understanding and confidence about what sustainability really means, about what your options are in terms of investing. So there's lots of barriers, and we recognize those barriers. And when this is a thriving market in 5 years' time, 10 years' time, it will certainly benefit from the fact that all of these barriers have been removed. But these barriers are data processing barriers, they're ecosystem barriers, they're legislation barriers. As a result, we're not going to remove them all overnight. But if we're to achieve the goals of growing sustainable business as quickly as possible, we need to find the best way to get moving. So what we're doing in our session, and it's worked many times before, is then really thinking about the end-to-end process of green financing, issuing a green bond, green loans, these sorts of things, end-to-end, and really characterizing all of the pain points, both more immediately in terms of the process of green bond issuance, but also at a higher level in terms of barriers to issuance of green finance and higher level opportunities. And then we're looking at that in terms of, well, where are the opportunities right now within that we should zero in on in order to move this forward, in order to meet a current market demand that's the right stepping stone on the way of achieving that goal of an awful lot more green finance flowing through the system. So with the experts that we have and their particular viewpoints, what we're going to be doing is really identifying those areas in the overall process flow of issuing green finance where we can make an improvement, we can do something, changes in legislation, starting up a new company, forming a new green finance instrument, whatever that is, that we see that it meets a current customer demand, and that is something viable that we could go for in the near term that is in the right direction in terms of where we're going on the long term as well. So it's in terms of crossing a large stream, it's finding the stepping stones. We're identifying those stepping stones because we all agree we want to get to the other, cross to the other bank, but how do we get there?
A lovely analogy, and those barriers and blockers will be addressed today at this event. So I better let you get back to it.
Yeah, thank you.
Matthew, thank you very much for speaking with us.
Thank you very much. It's great.